Okay, so let's go back to our form component and to the register component. And what we're going to do is take a look at validation this time. And inside each of these form controls, what we can do is we could give it a starting value. We could give it an initial value. What do we want this to be? And I'm just going to say hello for now. Obviously, this is just a demonstration. And then what we can add, the next parameter, is our validation options. And what we can specify here is validators, and then we can choose from the out-of-box validators that Angular provides. And what we'll do in here is we'll just specify that this particular field is required for the username. What we can also do is not bother with an initial value and just give it an empty string, because we need to get access to the second parameter here. And if we wanted to add two validators, then we would put them inside an array. So what we'll do here is we'll say validators is required, and then we'll add another validator and we'll say validators, and we'll give it a minimum length property that matches what we're doing on our server of 4. And then we could add another validator and say validators and max length, and we can specify 8. And let's just bring these down. For the confirm password, again, we'll just add an empty string and we'll say validators, and what we really want to do is compare this against the password field, but we don't actually have an option inside here to do that. So what we can do is we'll just say required for this one for now, and then we'll need to add a custom validator so that we can compare the password field with the confirm password field. But let's take a look at the impact this has had on our browser first of all. So we'll go back to register, and what we see now is our form status is invalid because we have added the validation. So we get our initial value, we can see that's in there. Obviously we can change that, and then we can specify the password of test, still invalid, and then we can specify the password in the confirm password box. But if I take a character away, then we're not meeting the minimum length validation, so the form goes back to invalid. If I continue typing and continue typing, then eventually we're going to add too many characters and we see the form status of invalid. Easy. And of course then we can click on our button, and of course we can click on this button because we haven't prevented our register button from being clicked, but that is something that we would need to do as well. But we'll do this as we go through this particular section. What we'll take a look at next is what we can do about these password fields, and how can we get this field to confirm that this is the same as this field. And we'll take a look at that next. Okay, so what we want to take a look at now is how do we add a custom validator for when Angular doesn't cover the functionality that we require here. So we'll head back to VS Code, and what we'll do, in order to add a custom validator, we'll need to create a new method, and we're just going to call this one match values. And what we're going to specify in here is what we want to match to, and we're going to match to a string because our field names are strings. And what we're going to do from this, we'll actually specify a type of what we want to return. And what we're returning here is a validator function. So we'll say validator fn, and that's the return type from this particular method. So what we'll do is we'll open up the curly brackets, and what we want to return from this is a control, and it's going to be of type abstract control. And all of our form controls derive from an abstract control, and that's what we want to return from this. So we're going to say abstract control, and then what we'll do is we'll add an arrow function, and we're going to return the control, and then we'll add the optional chaining, and we want to say dot value. And did I bring in abstract control? Is that the reason I'm getting the error? Yes, okay. So what we need to do is say control, and then we should be able to get access to the control's value. And what we want to do is compare this against the control, add the optional chaining, the control's parent, and then the controls, and this gives us access to all of the controls in the form. And then what we want to do is pass in the match to. What are we going to be matching this to? So we'll pass in controls match to access the specific control that we're comparing against, and we want to get the value of this control. And then we'll add a ternary operator, and if it doesn't match, we return null. And if it does match, then what we do is we return an object and we say is matching. This can be anything, by the way. This is just an arbitrary name that I'm just making up to say that yes, this validator is passing. And then we're going to say true. In fact, I said that completely backwards. What I'm just going to clarify now is that what we're doing here is we're getting access to the control that we're going to attach this validator to. Now we're going to attach this to our confirm password control. So that means the control here is the confirm password control, and we're going to go up to compare this to whatever we pass into the match to, and we're going to pass in the password that we want to compare this value to. And if these passwords match, then we return null, and that means validation has passed. If the passwords don't match, then we attach a validator error called isMatching to the control, and then this will fail our form validation. And let's move stuff down so I can fit it all on a single screen. So then what we can do is we can go up to our confirm password form control, and we'll need to add the square brackets because now we're going to be passing in an additional validator. And what we want to do is say list.matchValues, and then we're going to specify password as the field that we want to match this against. So we should be able to go and test this functionality to make sure this is working. So we'll head over to the form again. I'll click on register, and then we'll specify test as the password. And if we specify test, we're still getting invalid at this stage because we've not met the requirements of our second validator. And then ST, then we get to see that the form status is now valid. And if I change, then we go back to invalid, and if I take the field away, we go back to valid. Cool. But there is a problem though. If you change the password after you've validated the confirm password, what you'll find is that it doesn't invalidate our form. We need to add something additional inside our initialize form method. So if we go back to VS Code, I'll just show you where you need to add this. And what we need to do inside the initialize form, because the confirm password, the validator is only applied to the confirm password, what we need to do is also check the password field again and update its validity against the confirm password. So what we can do to achieve that is underneath our list.registerForm method, so just below this one, then what we can say is list.registerForm, and we can specify controls, and we want to get the password control, and we're going to check the value changes of this control, and then we subscribe to the value changes. And then inside here what we can do is say list.registerForm.controls.confirm password, and then we can say update value and validity. So what we're going to be testing for is when our password changes, then we're going to update the validity of that field against this field as well. So if you add this in, then we can validate against both of these fields, and if either one of them changes and does not match with the other one, then we validate our form once again. So what we want to do though is we're not going to be leaving this text on the form, of course. We want to be able to provide feedback to the user when they've done something wrong and they don't meet our validation requirements, and we'll take a look at that next.